This is Mendix Best Practices with Nolan Ramsey. Today I'm going to talk about calculated fields performance. Hi guys. We had a situation this week with a customer where one of my developers had created a solution, and the performance was not up to snuff, to say the least. So I went in to help him do some troubleshooting and spent a little bit of time looking at what had been built and determining where the bottlenecks were. And I wanted to share that with everyone so that they can learn how to do some performance tuning on their own and help them make some decisions around calculated fields and where maybe they aren't such a great idea to use. They do have a place, and I encourage you to go read the Mendix documentation about performance tuning that talks a little bit about calculated fields. They do have a purpose, and you should use them at times. But if you're involving batch processing at all, I highly, highly discourage you from using them. That being said, let's talk about this use case scenario. So the story was that the user needed to be able to show or hide the attributes of the order line. It was a parent-child relationship, so I'm not going to give specifics, but we're going to use order and order line in a master detail relationship perspective. And the idea was that they needed to show or hide the different attributes of the line item, the order line, based on a template that the administrator had created for those associated orders. So as an example, maybe I build a template. I'll use this as an example. I'll say I'm in the business of selling cars. So for sports cars, I'm going to build a template, and I'm going to say, I want on my order line, one of the fields that you can choose from is number of doors when you're ordering your car. But if it's a sports car template, I don't want to show that option. It's always going to be 2. So I'm going to remove that attribute from the order form so that when you're creating your order line as a dealership to say, give me these cars, you're not going to choose how many doors you want on your sports cars. But on my coupes or sedans, well, coupes are anyway, where I could, let's just say sedan, but I give the option to choose 2 doors or 4 doors. I want to show that attribute. So terrible analogy, use case aside, you get the idea that there's a template that determines which of these attributes should be visible to the end user. And the way my guy constructed it on the surface makes a lot of sense. He thought, let's push this logic so it's always enforced down to the entity. It's a calculated field. I don't have to create a microflow logic to control this. That way it's always enforced. It's also a calculated field, so this should be done in memory with runtime. That was his understanding, and that the performance should be way more optimized to do it that way, to show hide, because I'm going to do conditional visibility on the UI, on the page, to show based upon these results. So all of this makes a lot of sense. It should work. Except that's not exactly how calculated fields work. And I'm not going to get too deep into the weeds about how they work, but I'm going to show you the difference in performance about why that's not a great idea, especially in the batch process. The reason for this was that he needed to show to the customer 10 lines at a time or 100 lines at a time. And the performance was just awful when you had to do that, because the UI, even after you've gone through the processing time to determine whether you should or should not show something, you then have to pass that over to the browser so that the browser on the UI side can determine what am I showing. Well, maybe not the browser specifically, but I want to keep this high concept at the client side. What the client is interacting with then has to determine if I'm showing or hiding these variables. So there's processing time on the server. That's what this stuff is all about, to determine, to set these values. And then there's processing time for the client to determine whether or not, they see the visibility condition that you've set on the page or not. And I know there's a little bit of inaccuracy in what I've said in terms of the very detailed specifics technically, but just stay with me. This is a conceptual run and a performance show. Okay, with that aside, hopefully I haven't confused anyone. Let's talk about how this is implemented. So I've got an order form. This is here, and then I've got my individual order lines. And I'm going to hit the button to create a batch, and I'll create 100 records at a time. based upon that, I'm setting the values either without calculated fields. So when I create the objects, I set the values based on the template, and then that's what's used to determine and show, or I'm doing calculated values to determine whether or not I should show it. The difference in how that looks, this is the no calculated version where I retrieve the template object, and then each object I create in my loop, I set the value based upon the template. So I'm just mapping one-to-one, and I'm saying if the template says true or false, then you're going to be true or false. That's this method. This is the recommended way that I came up with to my developer to say, let's try this out. I know that we'll have better performance. But let's say you didn't know. You're just performance tuning. You're trying to figure it out. This was the version that he had where I don't need to retrieve the template object. I don't even care because my calculated field enforces that at the entity level. So I don't need to do all that mapping here because it's already done down in my domain model, again, as my calculated fields. So this version, I'm setting it. This version, I'm generating it as a calculated field. And then finally, on each of my attributes that I want to show or hide, I set the visible condition based upon the value that I've got back on there. So in this case, they're Booleans. This is really easy. I could do it on expressions, etc. So, if it's over $50, don't show it, that sort of thing. Okay, so I've set this stuff up. This is what it looks like here. Let's go into the app and take a look because that's where it's pretty important. So on my template overview, I created this template here where I just made all of the even numbers true or yes. I said, yes, I want to show those. Don't show me the odds. Okay. Now on my parent overview or my order form, I just haven't changed these to say order. I had originally called this parent child. I'm going to go into, it doesn't matter, just an order. And I chose that template that had those values. So let's do that. I gave it a name, doesn't really matter. And, I forgot to mention this, but in my microflow, I'm logging a message by calculating in milliseconds the time, this is the system side, to create each one of these records. Okay, what does it take from start to finish when I say create 100 orders, create 100 order lines? How long does that process take? So I can figure out from the system perspective how long that's taking. Okay, so first I'm going to do it with the calculated fields. This was the experience, and I'm showing all 100 records. Yep, let's show that again. So in my list, I've got my page size set to 200 at the moment, so that when I push the button and I generate 100 records, all 100 with their visibility conditions will show on the page. This is like a worst case performance scenario. Okay. So I will push the button and we're going to wait. I don't have the little timer on that puts the little dial. Obviously that's a best practice and you should do that. I didn't do that for this little test because I whipped it together in about 20 minutes. Okay, so I did push the button. We're still waiting because it is going through the process of generating 100 lines and setting the conditions based upon calculated fields at runtime. So we're going to be patient here. This is going to take a little time to do 100 records. Now, it doesn't sound like 100 records is a lot, but again, this is because of the calculated fields that's causing this. And there's no pagination used. I'm saying render it, figure it out, and show all 100 records at once. So here you go. Now, from a systems perspective, and by the way, let's just look at this. It is accurately showing me the values that I want to see. Okay, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. So it got it right, but it did take a really long time, as you just saw. So on the system side, if I look at my console, right there, you see that it took an exorbitant amount of time for the system to generate those records. Now, to be fair, I'm running this on my laptop while I'm recording this video, so I'm kind of hogging up resources that could otherwise be used. But that's a crazy amount of time. That's 14, almost 15 seconds to generate the data before it even gets to the page to show it to us. Okay? I'm going to do the exact same thing now with non-calculated fields where I go through and I create the objects and set the values that is used to do the conditional visibility. So So I'll push the button. Same process. Now, it's not going to be to the naked eye. I mean, you would expect this to already be done, right? I'm doing a worst case scenario here right now to show you the difference and why this is significant. Okay, the data's back already. It was way faster than that one. Even to the naked eye, you could tell that this came back a lot quicker than that one. It did accurately give us the data back that we were expecting for the attributes. We showed the right stuff. And let's go look at the performance here. So if I look here, it took 415 milliseconds as opposed to 14. So we're talking about less than a second server side to generate all of those records versus almost 15 seconds to generate all of those records. Out of curiosity, let's just do it one more time. I'll delete them all. Okay. And I'll do it in the same order. So create batch. And I don't think it's going to take all 15 seconds, but I am eating up resources like a hog at the moment. So as soon as that's done, I'm going to create the batch over here. We'll look one more time at the 2 times that it's taking. I'm going to highlight the next performance thing that you want to tune in this process. So you can see there it took quite a while. I'll push the button over here. While that runs. So this time it took 8.5 seconds to render that process. Again, there's different optimizations that the database is doing with caching and processing. That's the first time I pushed the button since starting the runtime, as you can see here. But you can also see that while it halved the time that it took for the calculated attributes, it also halved the time. So now we're down to 0.2 of a second, 0.3 of a second. But the end user experience isn't experiencing that kind of performance. And the reason for that is because while we're generating the records and with the conditions, it still has to pass it over to the client to apply those conditions. And I'm building a process here that says show all 100, as you can see here, show me all 100 records and conditionally show which one's here, because all the attributes are here. Right? All attributes are there. I'm just not showing them. I'm hiding them from the end user to be able to be seen. Okay, so what do we do about performance tuning this more? Well, that's why you should limit your lists. Now, this isn't calculated field. This steps into performance tuning for your end user beyond the calculated attributes. We've already proven on the server side that not using calculated fields in this manner is about roughly 10 times, maybe more faster. Looks like 20 times faster almost. So somewhere between 10 and 20 times faster. But let's do one more step. Let's use pagination like you should. The end user is not going to handle 100 records at a time that you're generating for data input. If I were building a report to read data, to show them that data, that's a different story entirely, and I would never be doing it in this manner. And I wouldn't be using calculated fields to do that. But if I want to input data, which is what this is all about, then I need to limit this. I'm never going to handle 100 at a time, but maybe 10. Maybe I want to generate 10 on my order line and then see all 10 and then go in and start keying in the data. That makes a lot of sense. So let's set the pagination of this thing down to 10, right? The page size. All right, and I'll do it to both, to be fair. Now let me quickly redeploy. So we're still generating 100 records. That doesn't change. But I'm only going to serve up 10 at a time to the customer. Now this will definitely show you the difference between using calculated fields versus not calculated fields to your naked eye. All right, so I've redeployed that. Just to be safe, I'll reload the app, go back in here, template, and I'll keep it consistent for this. So calculated fields, I'm going to create batch. Again, it's only going to show me 10 records. It will be significantly faster. I press the button. And I expect this to take about 7 seconds in previous testing. although that was when I was not recording the video. Okay, so still pretty significant, and I showed 10 records. Let's look at the performance server side. So yeah, that's consistent with what it did before. So it took that delay that you saw was the entire time that it took to build this, because again, it's doing it at the entity level. So it had to build all 100 records and then serve up the 10. So what you can infer from that is that it didn't improve performance at all to do pagination where I'm doing calculated fields because of how the rendering happens and how it gets passed over. It really didn't improve anything. But now we noticed before that it was taking roughly 5-6 seconds, something like that, maybe 7 seconds when I pushed this button to render all 100 objects. This was taking about 14, right? Or when we got it down to 8 seconds, this was taking about 5. But now watch the difference. All right, I push the button and there you go. It's instantly there. Again, I'll do it one more time. Create batch. Boom. The reason that that's so much faster is because of pagination. So this is the experience that I want my end user to create. And just so anyone doesn't think I'm doing some funny business here, I'll choose a different template that has different rules. Create batch. There you go. I'm only showing 3, 6, and 9 on that second template. Again, instantly. And if I look at my timing down here, you can see the performance difference. I'm serving up the data as fast as it can be served. That delay from the time that it took to build the 100 records to when it rendered on the page to the end user was what was being passed over to them to apply these rules. Okay? That because I had to give them all 100 records to do that on. That's what the performance hit was being at. Now, so changing from calculated over to non-calculated made about a 10 to 20 fold difference in terms of the build of the objects. So that was huge, but you don't take advantage of that until you use pagination correctly. And then I'm serving up the data as quickly as I can build it. I'm not giving them all 100 to render these objects one at a time. So I hope that this was pretty useful, guys. I hope that you got to see firsthand. Sorry it's a little bit long, but I really wanted to kind of walk you through this and show you the difference between calculated performance and non-calculated performance. Appreciate any feedback that you can give me. I hope this was really helpful, and look for you on the next one. Thanks a lot, guys.